Hello, this is Dale Dreps. I am with St. George Episcopal Church of Lady Lake, Florida, and I have the honor to chair the search committee as our church calls its next rector. And I have been working with Father Dan Smith of the Diocese of Central Florida. And I will be asking him a few questions about this whole process of calling a new rector. He is our consultant, supplied to us by our bishop, Greg Brewer. So Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
And we're really delighted to have you as a part of our Musings on Faith podcast. So our goal today is to shed light on the process we will follow here at St. George.
Okay.
And, our parishioners are actually quite curious about you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I guess that's a good place to start. What to tell? I'm a fourth generation native Floridian. My father was involved in the agricultural business in Florida, citrus, vegetables, and cattle. And grew up, kind of in that lifestyle here in Central Florida. I used to hunt and fish up near where the villages are these days.
Oh, really?
And I can remember that as a kid and as a teenager. I'm married. Evelyn and I've been married for almost 43 years. We have grown children, 5 grandchildren. I have a daughter over in Tampa with her family and a son in Columbia, South Carolina with his. He's also an Episcopal priest, which is always interesting that we share not only the family things, but the professional stuff as well. I grew up in Central Florida. I was ordained in the Diocese of Central Florida, both to the diaconate and the priesthood, and served 3 congregations in Central Florida before being called away from this diocese. And part of that was I formed and founded St. Matthew's in Orlando, as the founding vicar of that congregation. And then somehow we moved all the way to Honolulu and lived in Honolulu for 8 years, where I was rector of a church there. From there, we went to the Diocese of Iowa, where the bishop was an old friend and asked me to come and work with a very troubled congregation. And so we went up there and worked with that congregation and really brought them back to a place of health. From there, the priest who was in the neighboring church to mine in Iowa got elected Bishop of Missouri, and he asked me to go with him, and I became his canon of the ordinary, which is sort of, I used to say that if the bishop was the captain of the ship, then the canon of the ordinary was the executive officer. Made the trains run on time and ran his staff for him, and did a lot of work with congregations, including searches. And probably while I was in that diocese and in that position, I was there for a little over 12 years, and probably did 60 plus searches in that diocese. And then I've done searches in other dioceses as well. So retired early, but realized I wasn't quite done. So I worked part-time at Holy Cross Episcopal Church, and then I worked part-time as a consultant for the Diocese of Central Florida. And actually, I still run part of my dad's old land and cattle business. It's very small these days, but it's more of a hobby than anything else, but it pays for vacations. So that's, we have a hobby that pays for a vacation. That's pretty good.
Sounds good to me. I always say I'm very happy that my husband is still because someone has to fund my golf addiction.
That's right.
It works.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds, Father Dan, like you are intimately familiar with the process of calling a new rector. And I'm hoping that for our listeners, you could just give us a brief overview of the process so that everyone understands how we're doing this and why it works.
Sure, I think we can do that. I kind of look at this in 5 parts, I guess, probably really 6 part. The first part would be saying goodbye to the previous rector. And that's an important puzzle. I've always said that if you do a good goodbye, it makes it easier to do a good hello. You need to end one chapter to begin a new chapter. So I guess really there's 6 parts to this. First part being saying goodbye, which of course St. George has already done. The second piece of the puzzle is really an incredibly important piece because it builds the foundation for the relationship with the new rector. And that's developing what's a clear, honest, accurate picture of the congregation, where the congregation has been. So it's past, it's present, and its future. You need to have that clear, honest picture of the congregation because it gives you an idea of what the needs really are. It allows you to know for sure what you want to carry over from the past and the present into the future, but it also allows you to know what changes might need to be made and certainly what challenges would face a new rector. Rectors want to be challenged. They don't want to come in and just dust shelves. And so they want challenges, and at least high quality ones do. And St. George is obviously looking for a high quality rector. And so you want that clear, honest picture. It gives you the ability to have a clear understanding of the people who might match St. George's. You really want somebody that, to use an old expression, that sort of fits hand in glove with you all. Because that makes for a long-term, or makes it possible for a long-term pastorate, which is what most congregations would really like to have. I think St. George's being one of those. The third part then would be to collect and collate and sort of write a narrative out of all that data that has been that's been put together. That all that data will go into 2 places. One of the places it'll go into is your own website that allows you to do a full update of your website, some of which your congregation's already done, but you may learn some things in the midst of interviews that allow you to update the website even further. Part of the reason you want to do that is not only because new people to the villages will look at your website, want to know who you are before perhaps they come to church, but also every priest that we sort of began to have a conversation with is going to go to your website as well and want to learn about the congregation as much as they possibly can. The second thing you do with all that data is you fill out what is called the Office of Transition Ministry portfolio. The Office of Transition Ministry is an office at 815 in New York City, where the National Church headquarters is. It maintains a database of many of the congregations, certainly all the congregations that are in the search process, and it maintains a database that has portfolios representing virtually all the active clergy in the Episcopal Church. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,500 clergy have portfolios in the computer at 815 in the National Church headquarters. And that's part of what we'll use to search. But this portfolio also allows you to take that accurate, honest picture that you've done, build this portfolio, and the meat of that portfolio are 11 questions that will be answered. Now, the interesting thing is this portfolio that clergy have, the clergy are asked the exact same 11 questions. Sort of the pronouns are changed rather than the meat of the question. And that also allows you to do the comparison, to work hard at comparing apples to apples and find that person that really matches. So that's kind of the third part of this. The fourth part is seeking names. And we're going to seek names from several locations. We're going to ask the members of St. George's if they know anybody that they think should be considered. We will ask the clergy of the Diocese of Central Florida for potential nominations. We will ask the bishop, and perhaps I should have said him first, but we will certainly ask the bishop if he and his office, if he has names that he would like the folks at St. George's to consider. We will also post the portfolio that St. George's does on the National Church's website and allow clergy to see it and respond if they will, and that is apply for the position of rector. And then we will certainly there'll be some word of mouth and things like that. That's, sort of a subsidiary to all the above, where we will collect those names. So that's kind of the next part. And then they go into, obviously you go into the evaluation of whatever those candidates' names are. We could end up, my guess is we could end up with anywhere from 5 to 25 or more names. My hope is we'll arrive at somewhere between 10 and 20, 15, 16 names to start with. I think that would be a healthy start. We'll kind of see where we go. But then there's an evaluation, there's interviews, there's visits that take place of the final candidates actually coming to the villages and being at St. George's for a time, probably in the middle of a week. And then the very last phase of the search process is welcoming the new priest into town. Just as you've started it with a really good goodbye of the old rector, you start the new one with a really good welcome. And you look forward to that first, not only that first Sunday, but sort of first event, whether maybe there's a dinner and maybe there's just, some time of fun. As you welcome the new priest and his or her family into your midst. That's an overview of what the process looks like.
Well, that was very complete. Thank you. So it sounds like most Episcopal churches in the United States follow this process, or is it just Central Florida?
No, I think that the process that's used in Central Florida has significant similarities from all across the country. And part of that is because of is not only that it allows us to have a centralized database with names in it and the portfolios and the clergy in it. I mean, I'm retired and I'm happy and I don't want to go anywhere, but I have a portfolio in the computer, in New York as well. And it's just part of it to have that. And then the other thing is that people who do what I do, transition ministry, meet together on a regular basis. I don't go to many of those meetings anymore, but Scott Holcomb, our canon to the ordinary in the diocese, does. And for all the transition officers in Province 4, which is Southeastern United States, meet together twice a year. Groups of other provinces meet together twice a year. There's usually a national conference every year or every other year. This last year, of course, none of that took place because of COVID. But because of those gatherings and because of that networking, there really is sort of at least the outline, and maybe a little more than an outline of a process that's used in virtually every diocese in the country. That said, every diocese has its own, sort of quirks or own details and, and things like that they do. And certainly Central Florida has those, like any other diocese would. But yeah, the process, generally speaking, in a broad brushstroke piece, is done nationally.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, so we're right in sync with our national church, which is good to know. So I've had some questions from parishioners.
Sure.
I'd like to just hurl at you, Father Dan.
No problem.
So, one question I received early on was, who selects our new rector? Is it you, our consultant, or is it the search committee?
Well, in some ways, it's neither one. Let's start there. First of all, let's really make sure that it's understanding what my role is. My role really is the role of a coach. I am not playing the game. The St. George's is really playing the game. My role is to coach, it's to teach, it's to try to get you in a place as the congregation, in a place where you can, in fact, select a really good priest to be the rector who really does match St. George's and really can live, and minister for a considerable length of time there at St. George's in what would be a great, respected, loving, wonderful relationship. Mm-hmm. Well, the primary group that I coach is the search committee. That's the primary group that I coach. And the search committee's role is to get that clear, honest picture that I talked about a while ago. It's to collate all that data, to fill out, the forms and to write the narratives and make sure the website is up to date, and then begin the evaluation of candidates. But at some point, the search committee will actually turn this over to the vestry. And the search committee will present to the vestry one or two, maybe three names at the outside, but certainly one or two names to the vestry. And then the vestry will actually do the final interviews and do the final selection of who they wish to be called as the rector of the church, which is of course why the vestry is so important, and why even vestry elections, that happen once a year, are so important, because the vestry really is representing the rest of the congregation and representing the needs, desires, hopes, dreams of the congregation as they make that final selection.
Okay, great. And then I have one other question for you that I've been asked, and that is, why don't we just post a help wanted ad and have Father Ed, our current associate rector and acting rector, review some resumes and choose somebody?
Well, sure. I mean, I suppose some people would think that was an easier way, and certainly probably would be a quicker way of going about it. But it's likely not to end up with a good match for probably several reasons. First of all, it leaves out doing the homework. I believe that the work that is currently taking place at St. George's, the interviews that are taking place, the Zoom meetings, the in-person meetings, the filling out of questionnaire, all of those types of things allow you to truly do your homework as a congregation and truly get a feel for what the congregation hopes for, dreams about, what the important qualities they see in a new rector. And so this process allows for the congregation to really be engaged and involved. And that's important. I guess to a certain degree, we are hanging out a help wanted sign when we post on the portfolio with the National Church, and certainly as we allow clergy in the diocese to know that this opening is in place and that you're receiving names. Then lastly, Father Ed, and I know Father Ed, I love Father Ed, but Father Ed's too close, to the process. You really, and not only that, but priests, no matter how good they are, priests come and priests go. The congregation stays, and the lay people in the congregation really stay involved and engaged and in the church. And so they really need to be the ones that are ultimately making the decision about who the new rector will be. I mean, it really is the congregation. The congregation is, I believe, theologically the body of Christ gathered together. And to rely on the previous rector to choose their successor, to allow an interim or a priest associate like Father Ed is, ignores, and I think in a really bad way, ignores the fact that it's really the body of Christ, the people who are there at St. George's, who really make up the church. And having the clergy do it would also lend us to what was a problem in the early church, and in some ways, and still in some denominations today, of just sort of rampant clericalism and the old father knows best, idea. And, I just don't want anybody to play that game anymore. It really is, I believe, the community of faith gathered together that needs to prayerfully make this decision.
Wow, that's an interesting view on this, and I'm happy that you were able to articulate that so well. I'm very sure that our listeners and our viewers have learned a lot from everything you've told us. Now, I have one last question for you. And that is, what is the role of the St. George parishioners in this process, and what can they do to help?
Sure. Well, I think there's four things that every parishioner, I hope, at least has the opportunity to do. They get to choose, I suppose, about what they do and not do. But there's four things that I really hope they will do. The first thing that I hope that every parishioner at St. George's will do is to pray. I believe this process has to be steeped in prayer. One of the things that I told the search committee early on is that they are working to call a respected leader, not hire a priest. And that calling of a respected leader has to be grounded in prayer. And that's something that everybody in the church, young, old, and in between, that's something that everybody can engage in. And I don't think that we can underplay the importance of that. And I don't think we can overstate the importance of it either. That prayer is absolutely essential. The second thing that I hope parishioners will do is to stay engaged, to be engaged in the process of gathering the information, process that your congregation is already in the midst of. But they need to be engaged. They need to make sure their voice is heard, and there's plenty of opportunities for their voice to be heard. And so you would want to do that. The third thing that I would hope parishioners would do is, if they happen to know a priest that they believe would be a good fit, that they would submit those names. They would send those names to you, and you're going to send them to me, because I do some background checks and things like that on them early on. But I hope that, and this may only be a very few parishioners that do this, but it's still another place for the congregation to be engaged. And then the fourth and final thing, and maybe even the most important thing, is as important as those other things are. The fourth thing is to welcome the new priest when they arrive, and to do that with some enthusiasm, to do that with love and respect and excitement about what the future is going to hold. So pray, be engaged, give names if you have them, and then to welcome the new priest. 4 ways that the congregation really can be involved.
That's wonderful. And in fact, we've already had 2 parishioners come forward and suggest and nominate some priests. So I'm very happy to say that I think St. George is in a pretty good spot right now. We've had tremendous enthusiasm in coming to our group interviews, and we have a lot more work to do, of course. I will also say that I've so enjoyed working with you, Father Dan, and I know I speak for the rest of the search committee when I say that we are delighted and very grateful to you for your guidance so far. And we'll be continuing to work with you over the next several months.
Yeah, the next few months, we're going to engage with one another 4 or 5 times at least.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to it too. And thank you for your kind words.
Oh, we've absolutely loved working with you. And I also want to thank you for taking the time today. I know you're a very busy man, and I appreciate your making this video with us. This is a part of St. George's online outreach efforts. We call our podcast series Musings on Faith. And these will be available via podcast and via video. The video will most likely be available to our parishioners, and the podcast to anyone.
Sure.
So listeners, if you have questions, please send them via email to us at musingsonfaith@gmail.com. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you.